So firstly, we're going to talk about mistakes when it comes to gesturing. And I've got four key mistakes for you, and you might want to write these down as we go. The first mistake would be having nervous gestures. Now, someone tell me, what do you think nervous gestures look like? Just raise your hand if you'd like to share. Jerry, go ahead.
It might be a twitch, or like you might just keep touching your nose or your.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember Wayne Rooney was never comfortable with interviews, and he used to do that all the time when he was talking. But he obviously developed that as he went on in his career.
He was probably just picking his nose as well. But yes, a lot of touching the neck, touching the face. We call these soothing gestures. When you see people feel uncomfortable, they kind of gesture like this and protect themselves a little bit. What other types of nervous gestures do we see? Any ideas? Nathan, please.
It'd be like close body language, like your hands closer to your body, or just putting in your pockets, and just pretty much like protecting yourself as well, but more towards your body rather than your face.
Yeah, so I think what you're talking about here is when people put their hands together across, often this area, right? Their midsection. And the reason we do that is we're making a subconscious effort to protect our vital organs, which are here. People often do this and they don't even realize that they're doing it, but it is a little bit defensive, and you often see people fidgeting here. And furthermore, what they will also do is they will gesture, but their gestures will be really small, like this. And when your gestures are small, your presence is small on the stage. And there's an extension of this too. Sometimes you get people gesturing small and then bringing their hands together. So after a while, it begins to look like you're playing an instrument, which is a little bit distracting for the audience as well. So these are all nervous gestures, nervous tics that we want to make sure we're not conveying to the audience. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is to be conscious if your hand's touching your neck or face, and avoid doing that. The solution here is to get your hands to the side and gesture from this place instead of inward and within your body. That will make a huge difference to how you are coming across. Does that make sense to everyone there? Okay, second gesture mistake is when people are overly aggressive with their gestures. Everyone right now, show me an aggressive gesture using your hands. Show me an aggressive gesture. Okay, Cavi's got the point, Rayham's got the point too. So this one, right, it's a bad one, isn't it? And if you're my mum, you'll say, when you point the finger, Kyle, there are 3 pointing back at you. And it's very true in many ways. But the reason a point is so aggressive and distasteful is because it singles out one member of the audience. It brings attention to them. It makes them feel uncomfortable. So if you feel you have to point something or someone out, instead of using one finger, have an open palm and do it like this. It's a little bit more of a friendly way to address the audience's attention. But there's other forms of aggressive gestures too. For example, downward palm gestures. When the palm of your hand is facing the ground. If you do these on a consistent basis throughout your presentation, you seem a little bit dismissive of some facts and figures, for example. You don't seem as friendly as when I have my palms up, for example, and I'm gesturing like this. There's a different feel to these types of gestures and these types of gestures. So I'm not saying don't ever gesture with your palm down, but don't do it frequently, is what I would say. Fourth mistake is actually not gesturing at all. Now, I'm curious, has anyone here been told that they use their hands too much or that their gestures are distracting? Has anyone been told that in the past? Nathan has, Kathy has, any others? Okay. Yes, this is a common concern a lot of people have. The idea that you can use too much gestures and it's so distracting that people don't take in your words. And that is very rarely the case. People who promote the idea of not gesturing, they are kind of referring back to the old age of speaking. The old idea when someone stands behind a podium and delivers a presentation. And this was very popular, this style of speaking, back in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. But as we moved into the 90s and the 2000s and the whatever we're in now, right? The idea of a speaker has changed. We don't just want someone standing there and delivering a written speech to us. No, now we want to see people's personality when they're on stage. We want to get a feel of who they are as an individual. And a huge part of that is using your hands. Because when you speak with your friends, your family, your colleagues on a one-to-one basis, you probably are gesturing with your hands. Most people do. So we want to bring that onto the stage as well, whether it be in person or online. Now, of course, there are times where you should not gesture, and we'll get into them later in the workshop today. But in general, gesturing is a great way for grabbing your audience's attention. And you have to also remember that the majority of your audience are visual learners. So if you gesture, you actually support their learning instead of just being a talking head like this. Fourth mistake is incongruent gestures. What do you think I mean by incongruent gestures? What does that mean? Any idea? Jerry, go for it.
Maybe gestures that leave a bit of a mixed message. So you're not very clear with what you're doing. You're confusing the audience.
Yeah, exactly. The gestures that don't match up with your words. So for example, if I say the building was so tall and my hand's down there, that doesn't make sense. If I say the football pitch was so big and I'm gesturing small, it doesn't make sense. If I say I felt so embarrassed, I wanted no one to look at me, it was terrible, I wish the ground would swallow me up, and my gestures are all over the place and I'm sort of grabbing attention with big gestures, it doesn't make sense. So you need to make sure the gestures you are using are in sync with what you are saying. It's your words that lead you to the dance, not your hands. So be conscious of that, because if you are incongruent, you'll create a disconnect with the audience, which will affect how much they trust you, how much they are engaged with you, and how clear your message is at the same time. So 4 mistakes to think about there. What was number 1? Shout it out for me. What was the first mistake?
Nervous gestures.
Nervous gestures. Hopefully more than Kathy next time. Number 2, what was the second mistake? Everyone unmute and shout it out.
Aggressive gestures.
Yeah, aggressive. Number 3. What was number 3?
Not gesturing at all.
Not gesturing. And number 4 was incongruent, right? Well, here's what we're going to do now. I'm going to do a